Hello, welcome to the online course development training. This training is divided actually into 3 workshops. The first one is designing for an online learning environment. The second one is writing your learning outcomes. And the third one is practicalities and deliverables. So let's get back to the basics of Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy talks about the fact that we are teaching to meet 3 dimensions, which we call the 3 learning domains. So we have the psychomotor domain, we have the cognitive domain, and the affective domain. And learning takes place in some kind of hierarchical structure. Okay. The first stage is knowledge. So there is some kind of knowledge sharing, not impartation, but sharing. In the 21st century, we believe that knowledge is shared in a class, not imparted. So several years back, we think that the lecturer or the teacher comes into the class with some kind of specialized knowledge. Of course, it's true. However, there are a lot of experiences and knowledge that students bring on board as well. And for an effective learning to take place, we need to blend these 2 sets of knowledge. And that is why we say that there should be some knowledge exchange or sharing. In that scenario, it means that the lecturer is actually a facilitator instead of a giver of knowledge. The second level is understanding. So knowledge sharing should lead to some level of understanding in the class. We are not saying that among all the students in the class, they will all have the same level of understanding. This can vary, but a large number of students should have that. The third level is application. So we want to test how they can apply this knowledge. And then they can analyze. They become very analytical. They will ask questions through engagement. Then they'll synthesize, break it into various units, and then we try to evaluate to make sure that all these stages are well understood. So another theory which underpins learning is what we call constructive alignment. What it means is that students have to construct their own learning, okay, based on their own abilities, based on their experiences, and based on how they understand things. Now, in terms of course design, usually we start with outcomes. So the first question every teacher or every lecturer will ask is, what do I want to achieve at the end of the day? If you are not able to answer this question, then you can't be an effective designer, okay, or teacher. What do you want them to achieve? Are you just teaching for teaching's sake? Are you just put in a class just because you are a teacher? No. So learning outcomes have to be thought through. Then you move to the assessment. Now we try to match assessment with learning outcomes. Okay, so every assessment is designed to achieve some learning outcomes, to test the achievement of some learning outcomes. Okay, that's what it means. Then you move to the activities. So you need to design various class activities or learning activities that would lead to the achievement of those outcomes. And then you think about content. Okay, usually we first think about content. What am I going to teach students? But really, you should start with outcomes. And then you design. Okay, but if you look at the learning journey of a typical student, you see that currently many students would learn through inspiration. I know in our universities, student engagement is always a problem currently. So you inspire students, and then they can learn, and then they apply, and you assess them, and outcomes are achieved. So the point I'm trying to make here is that inspiration is an important part of the students' learning. And that is why if you look at our storyboards, we try to include an introductory video. Make sure that video is interesting enough. Draw on examples. Draw on the benefit of that topic. Draw on some experiences. Make it interesting. Let them know the value of that topic or that lesson. Very important. So inspiration is important. Now, designing for online learning, what it is and what it is not. Designing for an online learning should be purposeful and focused. It should not be general. And that means that when you are designing your learning outcomes, which we're going to look at later, should be very focused. It should be an active experience, very structured journey, cognitively engaging, content unpacked into bits and pieces. Okay, ask yourself, this content I'm presenting, is it not too bulky? Break it down. Learning should take place in basic units. Emphasize on students producing evidence of learning. So we need to test. We need to engage them through activities to make sure that they can demonstrate some evidence of learning taking place. And because that is the only observable aspect of learning, you need to see. You need to see whether learning has taken place. What learning designing for online environment is not. One, passive experience for students. We don't want a student to be passive, particularly in an online environment where the tutor is not always available. We want it to be very engaging, so very active. We also don't want a learning environment which is reliant on live tutor support. So if the teacher is not there, learning doesn't take place. No. Also, we want it to be a situation where it is not unnecessarily challenging for students to understand. You present a content in class and students do not understand. Whose fault? It's your fault. Sometimes we think that students are not trying to understand, but the truth is that break it down into pieces. Give examples. Use activities. Okay? Draw on live lessons, some kind of practical lessons. And there, students will begin to understand you. So it's all about the exchange process. The community of inquiry model, which is an important part of learning design, has three domains or three parts. We have the teaching presence, we have the cognitive presence, and the social presence. And every effective online design should engage these three. There should be a teaching presence, which is coming from you as a facilitator. I wouldn't say as a lecturer, as a facilitator. So see yourself as facilitating the process. So you are designing the outcomes using effective learning activities and materials. There is live webinars. There is feedback, which is a very important process of learning. Because if you don't give feedback to students, they aren't going to know whether they are right or wrong. So feedback is important. And two, there should be cognitive presence, which means that you ask students to research and report. They write pieces of reports, some kind of quizzes, some portfolios, okay, in class. And then finally, there should be social presence. Use the class as a micro society, a micro organization. Use it. Engage them in activity, interaction, peer-to-peer learning, group work, group discussions. So engage the class as an organization, and then you can harness what we call quality learning experience. So the broad process of design and online learning, usually you see this stated in the module specification, okay, which has a module outcomes and learning outcomes, week by week lessons, okay. And then there should be some kind of assessment strategy, okay, and then that should lead to some content development, okay, create lesson activities as well as content. And finally, that should be leading to a storyboard, okay. So there should be some module outcomes and as well as learning outcomes, lesson outcomes, okay. So module outcomes then lesson outcomes, some kind of activities engaged, and contents is developed, and finally that should lead to some storyboard where you try to practicalize the actual learning process. Thank you very much.